I never intended for my family to discover the truth about me. For the past 3 years, I had worked as a housekeeper at the Richardson Grand Hotel, our family's pride and joy, all while secretly running Lux Global Hotels, the third largest hotel chain in the world. But if there's one thing about family, it's that they have a way of underestimating you, especially when they assume you're beneath them. My name is Evelyn Wu, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the best lesson in humility is allowing people to expose their own arrogance. The Richardson Grand had been in our family for 2 generations. My Uncle Richard inherited it from my grandfather and transformed it from a small, locally respected inn into a well-known regional hotel. But times were changing, and the Richardson Grand was falling behind, struggling to keep up with modern hospitality trends and drowning in debt my uncle refused to acknowledge. I still remember the exact moment I decided to take a job there. I had just finished a high-level meeting at Lux Global, where my executive team was reviewing potential acquisitions in the Northeast. When the Richardson Grand's name appeared on our target list, my heart skipped a beat. The Richardson family seems unwilling to sell, my CFO reported. They're in serious financial trouble, but they won't admit it. 6 months, maybe a year, and they'll be forced to sell for a fraction of what they're worth. I couldn't let that happen, not to my family's legacy. Even if they didn't recognize my worth, even if they still saw me as the quiet niece who had never done anything remarkable. So, I made a choice. The only way to truly understand what was happening inside the Richardson Grand was to see it from the ground level. I applied for a housekeeping position. Why would you want to work here? HR asked, clearly baffled by my resume. You graduated from Cornell's hotel school. I believe in learning from the bottom up, I said, knowing they wouldn't grasp just how true that statement was. For 3 years, I scrubbed floors, changed sheets, and watched. I took note of every flaw in the hotel's operations, all while running a billion-dollar empire remotely. In my downtime, my cousin Nathan, Uncle Richard's son and the hotel's current manager, never missed a chance to remind me of my supposed place. Evelyn, the bathroom in 306 needs cleaning, he'd call out loudly from across the lobby, ensuring that every guest in earshot knew he was ordering around his own cousin. Try not to take all day this time. I carried out every task with precision, silently collecting invaluable insights. Every leaking pipe, every outdated process, every guest complaint, I documented them all. But no one paid me any attention. In their eyes, I was just another housekeeper, someone easily overlooked. That changed last Tuesday. Normally, I wasn't invited to the family's monthly business meetings, but this time, Nathan had a special reason for wanting me there. The family assembled in the hotel's grand conference room, its fading mahogany panels and aging crystal chandeliers remnants of better days. Uncle Richard sat at the head of the table, his wife Margaret beside him. At the front of the room, Nathan stood practically vibrating with excitement, ready to make an announcement that he clearly couldn't wait to share. As you all know, Nathan began, adjusting his designer tie with an air of self-importance. The hotel industry is changing. If we want to stay competitive with the major chains, we have to modernize. With a click, the next slide of his presentation appeared. That's why I've developed a bold new rebranding strategy. I barely managed to keep from choking on my water. The so-called strategy he was presenting? Nearly identical to an initiative I had launched at Lux Global 2 years ago. He must have come across it in some industry publication, slapped his name on it, and passed it off as his own. We'll also need to streamline our operations, he continued, scanning the room before landing his gaze on me with a smirk. That means letting go of certain non-essential staff. Positions like full-time housekeeping will be phased out and replaced with an outsourced cleaning service. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. There was no need for him to spell it out, everyone understood exactly who he was targeting. Nathan, my Aunt Eleanor interjected, tilting her head in a performance of sympathy. Evelyn is family. Surely, we can find her another role. Perhaps something in the laundry? I remained quiet, watching the moment unfold just as he had intended. 3 years of snide remarks and thinly veiled jabs had all been leading up to this. Nathan wanted a grand spectacle, an opportunity to publicly dismiss me, to prove to the entire family that he was the rightful heir to the Richardson Grand. But he wasn't finished. Actually, he said, puffing up with satisfaction, I've already handled the transition. The new cleaning service begins next week. He turned toward me with an exaggeratedly polite smile. Evelyn, consider this your formal notice. We'll need your uniform back by Friday. I could have ended his little performance right then. I could have pulled out my phone, opened Lux Global's company page, and let everyone see my face next to the words Chief Executive Officer. I could have explained that my so-called breaks were spent overseeing a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning over 200 hotels worldwide. Instead, I stood, smoothed my uniform, and returned his smile. Of course, Nathan, I said evenly. I completely understand. I turned toward the door, taking a few steps before pausing. Then, as if just remembering something, I glanced back. Oh, and congratulations on the rebranding strategy, I added. It worked beautifully when Lux Global implemented it 2 years ago. A flicker of confusion crossed his face before dawning realization set in. I didn't wait for his inevitable stammering, his clumsy attempts to explain away what I had just implied. Instead, I walked out, leaving the room filled with the sound of hushed whispers and Nathan's frantic backpedaling. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 3 years compiling an exhaustive report on every flaw in the Richardson Grand's operations. The ignored health code violations, the deferred maintenance disasters, the financial discrepancies Nathan had tried to bury, every oversight and shortcut was meticulously documented. And tomorrow, Lux Global's CEO was scheduled to conduct an official inspection of the property. They just didn't know the CEO was me. That evening, I sat in my small apartment above the local coffee shop, finalizing the last few details of what was to come. My phone buzzed incessantly, some relatives expressing concern over my firing, others warning me not to make a scene. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to my executive team at Lux Global. Proceed with Operation Richardson as scheduled tomorrow. Ensure Nathan is present for the full inspection. I hit send, my lips curving into a slow smile. It's time he learned what real hotel management looks like. As I pressed send on the email, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. For years, Nathan had lectured me about knowing my place in the hotel business. Tomorrow, he was finally going to learn exactly what that place was. The next morning, I arrived at the Richardson Grand promptly at 9 a.m. But this time, I wasn't dressed in my usual housekeeper's uniform. Instead, I wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a piece from the life I had set aside for the past 3 years. My heels echoed against the marble lobby floor as I walked in, drawing the attention of guests and employees alike. Excuse me, ma'am, Nathan's voice rang out from behind the front desk, the same condescending tone he always used. Can I help you, Finn? His words faltered the moment I turned around. Evelyn? What are you? Why are you dressed like that? Good morning, Nathan, I replied smoothly. I believe you're expecting the CEO of Lux Global Hotels today. His face twisted in confusion, his brain scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Yes, but, he stammered. You need to leave. We have a major inspection today, and I can't have you making a scene over your termination. Before I could respond, the elevator chimed behind me, and the doors slid open. Stepping out were Daniel Foster, my CFO, Olivia Reed, our head of operations, and Jonathan Hayes, our chief legal officer, the very people who had been managing Lux Global alongside me through countless late-night meetings and video calls. Mrs. Wu, Daniel greeted me with a professional nod. The preliminary reports you requested are ready for review. Nathan's complexion turned an alarming shade of pale. Mrs. Wu, he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. What's going on here? I turned to him with a pleasant smile. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the conference room, I suggested. And Nathan? Please call Uncle Richard and Aunt Eleanor. I'm sure they'll want to be present for this. 30 minutes later, we sat in the very same conference room where, just a day before, Nathan had smugly dismissed me. Only this time, the power dynamic had shifted completely. My executive team occupied one side of the long mahogany table, while the Richardson family sat stiffly on the other, looking as if they had just seen a ghost. I stood at the head of the table, Uncle Richard's usual seat, and surveyed the room before beginning. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, my voice calm yet firm. "For the past 3 years, while working here as a housekeeper, I have also been serving as the CEO of Lux Global Hotels." Across from me, Aunt Eleanor let out a startled gasp. "Every so-called break I took," I continued, "wasn't spent slacking off, as Nathan liked to claim. They were spent running a company with over 200 properties worldwide." That's impossible," Aunt Eleanor whispered, her disbelief thick in the air. "You're just a maid?" I finished for her, arching an eyebrow. "That's exactly why this worked so well. You were also convinced of my insignificance that none of you ever thought to do a simple Google search on my name. None of you ever wondered why a Cornell graduate would apply for a housekeeping job." I flipped open my laptop, casting a series of documents onto the conference room's projector screen. During my time here, I documented everything, every health code violation, every deferred maintenance issue, every suspicious financial transaction. I shifted my gaze to Nathan, who was now intensely focused on the tabletop, avoiding my eyes at all costs. "That includes," I added, "the $500,000 from the hotel's renovation budget that was quietly redirected to cover gambling debts." Uncle Richard's head snapped toward his son. "Nathan," he barked. "Is this true?" "Dad, I can explain." I didn't give him the chance. "The Richardson Grand is less than 3 months away from bankruptcy," I stated bluntly. "Your reputation in the hospitality industry is crumbling, and your annual employee turnover rate is approaching 80%. The weight of my words settled heavily over the room. For the first time, my family, so confident in their assumptions about me, was finally seeing the truth. And this was just the beginning. "In short, this hotel is failing." The room fell into stunned silence. 3 years' worth of uncomfortable truths laid bare in a single moment. Uncle Richard was the first to break it. His voice, barely above a whisper, carried a weight I'd never heard before. "Why?" he asked. "If you really are who you say you are, why work here as a housekeeper?" I exhaled, letting my tone soften. "Because this hotel is our family's legacy," I said, meeting his gaze. "Grandfather built it from the ground up. I couldn't stand by and watch it collapse. I needed to see for myself what was wrong before I could figure out how to fix it." Nathan let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Fix it," he scoffed. "We don't need your help. And I still don't believe you're really." Before he could finish, Olivia slid a folder across the table. "Mrs. Wu's credentials, media coverage, corporate records," she said coolly. "Feel free to verify everything." One by one, my family sifted through the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to disbelief, then finally to understanding. I leaned forward. "Lux Global is prepared to buy the Richardson Grand," I stated. "It's a generous offer, especially given the hotel's financial condition. We'll preserve the family name and history, but we'll bring the property up to modern standards." Uncle Richard's jaw tensed. "And if we don't?" he asked. "Then I walk away," I said simply. "Both as a housekeeper and as a buyer. But I should warn you, the next company that comes knocking won't care about your legacy. They'll demolish the building and replace it with something new." For the first time that morning, Aunt Eleanor spoke. "All those times we looked down on you, treated you like you were nothing, you could have said something." I studied her for a long moment before answering. "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have dismissed it as the desperate lies of just a maid?" No one answered. But their silence spoke volumes. I gathered my papers and stood. "You have 24 hours to decide," I said. "If you accept, the Richardson Grand will become the flagship of our new classic hotels division. If not," I shrugged. "I hear property developers are offering a good price for the land." I had just turned to leave when Nathan's voice stopped me. "Wait." I glanced back. "The rebranding strategy one presented yesterday," he trailed off, his face flushing. It was yours, wasn't it?" I smiled. "Yes, I know," I said lightly. "Next time you steal someone's work, Nathan, make sure they're not sitting in the room." The next 24 hours were quiet. My phone remained still as my family processed everything they had just learned. I spent the day in my apartment, for the first time in years working freely at my laptop without the need to hide my true identity. Then, at exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. Uncle Richard's voice was thick with emotion. "We accept," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "But, Evelyn, can you forgive us?" I thought about the years of dismissive glances, the whispered remarks, the way they had all treated me like an outsider in my own family. But then I thought about my grandfather, the man who had taught me that real leadership wasn't about revenge. It was about leaving things better than you found them. "I'm not interested in forgiveness, Uncle Richard," I said evenly. "I'm interested in making the Richardson Grand great again. Are you ready to help me do that?" The transformation took 6 months. Nathan was reassigned to our Miami property, where he started from the ground up as an assistant manager, learning the business properly for the first time in his life. Uncle Richard decided to retire, though he remained on as a consultant, his decades of experience finally put to good use without the burden of managing the entire operation. Under new leadership, the Richardson Grand flourished. It became the crown jewel of our classic hotels division, a seamless blend of historic elegance and modern efficiency. Staff turnover dropped to just 15%, and guest satisfaction reached record highs. Exactly 1 year after everything changed, I stood in the newly renovated lobby, watching as guests checked in at the gleaming front desk. Overhead, the crystal chandeliers shimmered, restored to their original brilliance. Mounted on the wall was a new plaque, recounting my grandfather's journey, how he had built this hotel from nothing but a dream and sheer determination. Beside me, Aunt Eleanor gazed around, taking in the transformation with a quiet sense of pride. "You know, Evelyn," she said thoughtfully, "I think I finally understand why you did it this way." I turned to her, intrigued. "Oh, you could have bought the hotel outright 3 years ago," she continued. "Forced us all out. Instead, you chose to learn it from the inside, to see every issue, every challenge, every opportunity. You understood it before you tried to fix it." I smiled. "The best leaders don't just give orders," I told her. "They know every corner of their business, from changing sheets to managing multi-million-dollar investments." She nodded, her expression softening. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said quietly. "Not just for saving the hotel, but for how you did it." As I watched another family check in, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. 3 years of being overlooked, of scrubbing floors while running a global empire, of sitting silently in family meetings while being dismissed as insignificant. Had it been worth it? That morning, the hotel's latest rating had come in 5 stars, the highest possible score. Our occupancy rate had climbed to 95%, with a waiting list for premium rooms. More importantly, the staff carried themselves with confidence, well-trained and fairly compensated. My family, too, had learned invaluable lessons about humility, about respect, about what true leadership really meant. Even Nathan had found his stride in Miami. He was finally learning that real success came not from arrogance or shortcuts, but from discipline and hard work. Yes, it had been worth it. I straightened my suit jacket and made my way to my office, the same one where, not long ago, Nathan had summoned me to clean bathrooms. Now, it served as the command center for both the Richardson Grand and my role as CEO of Lux Global. On my desk sat a framed photo of my grandfather, beaming in front of the hotel he had built from nothing. Next to it, preserved in a shadow box, was my old housekeeper's uniform. A small plaque beneath it read, "Never forget where you started." And I never would. Because leadership isn't just about standing above, it's about understanding from within. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one worth paying attention to. And because, once in a while, the housekeeper tidying your room is actually the CEO, making sure everything is just right. Even now, I occasionally put on a housekeeper's uniform and work a shift alongside my staff. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me of what truly matters. After all, you never know who might be watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment to show the world what they're really capable of.